I have this, in case any of you are wondering. My daughter got all these, tattoos, these sticker tattoos, temporary tattoos. And I've had this thing. These things don't come off. You can use baby oil to get them off, but um, I've let this lollipop with a bow, I've just let this thing sit for like a week plus, so eventually it will come off. This is why you watch these YouTube videos, for these glimpses into my life. But in all semi-seriousness, yeah, I hope that you watched my Kuwait video. Yesterday, I released it about his various experiments and hypnotic suggestions to, basically make you see that what you're thinking, what you're suggesting to yourself, if it fills your mind, it's very likely to happen. That's so important. It's just like a fundamental underlying concept, that I think really pertains to any law of attraction teaching, whether it be very psychological sounding or very spiritual sounding. It still has so much to do with self-suggestion, in my opinion, no matter what. And filling your mind with hopefully more positive thoughts as opposed to negative thoughts in just a pragmatic way. So yeah, I got a email from a longtime reader slash listener slash, I guess, viewer of this YouTube channel at this point. And I thought I would just answer her question briefly. She was just basically asking if I had any recommendations for ways to clear out like long lingering resentment and anger. So this is not like anger from a recent event. This is like resentment and anger from either a childhood event or a traumatic event that was years ago. If it wasn't from childhood, it was, a while ago. As most of you probably know, we hold on to unresolved anger and resentment, most of us do, far more than we need to, right? There's this tendency to hold on to grudges and to feelings that we didn't feel like we got to really process appropriately and not release them and let them go. So my advice for this person, I my real advice would be, I've probably talked about this before, and so many other people have talked about this before. And I think it's about really just continuously exploring this anger and resentment that you feel. The more aware we become of kind of, held down, long-held anger or long-held resentment or long-held fear, the more we consciously become aware of that stuff. That's like, oh yeah, I've had that for years. I've had that since childhood. The more consciously aware, you see this piece of hair here? Crazy. The more consciously aware we become of that, the more we're able to work with it. And I guess you could then say eventually release at least part of it, if not all of that pent up energy. You've heard this before in all likelihood, like we all have. It's a question of doing it. And is there any one way to do it? Of course not. There's so many different ways. Again, I think traditional therapy does a very good job of delving into this, delving into past trauma, delving into past anger, making us more aware of it. The problem that a lot of us encounter when we do traditional therapy and not more alternative avenues is that, perhaps the therapist, gets us to go back in time, whether it was to our childhood or to that traumatic event in our teens or 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s, whenever it was. It makes us explore it more, but often it seems like with therapy, inadvertently, we can add to the story and still not process it. It's like, I'm aware now that when I was a teenager, I had these difficulties, but I don't actually feel that much better, even though I'm aware of it. So how do we feel better about it, as opposed to just becoming more aware of it? How do we actually process it? And this is where there's so many different ways to process it. Good therapy, a good therapist will give you a way to process it. You know, a good therapist will show you different modalities or figure out something that works for you to make you feel better about this past resentment or anger. An example of a modality that has worked for me and that is recent, I've really only gotten into it for like the last year, is IFS. I've mentioned it a lot recently, internal family systems, which is a Dick Schwartz modality. There's a bunch of YouTube videos you can find of Dick Schwartz talking about it and even guiding people through this modality. IFS is freaking incredible for dealing with past trauma and past micro trauma and issues with anger. I love it. So I would recommend IFS if you want to go like a quote unquote traditional therapeutic route. I don't know how traditional IFS is, but it is a somewhat traditional therapeutic route compared to some of the stuff I'm about to suggest. Something else for releasing past anger and resentment. All the letting go stuff we always talk about, like the David Hawkins stuff. Feeling into the feeling, feeling the feeling, really feeling it. And then inevitably, because of your awareness of the feeling and being more and more comfortable with the feeling being there, it will make that feeling dissipate and go away. Like that sunlight just went away. But there's so many different ways of doing it. It's just doing it. And again, the more aware of it that we become, the more easily we can process it and start to actively process it. I do feel like this involves an active, conscious processing of at least the feelings behind, the traumatic situation that caused this anger or resentment. You want to process it. To give some more like Tim specific ideas, stuff that I utilize, talking out loud. I would certainly talk out loud. As I've discussed a lot. I'll link again to, the recent video, one of the recent videos I did on talking out loud. While talking out loud, I would not, or not even just while talking out loud, but in general, I would not be afraid. I would encourage becoming very loud and active about this anger and resentment, or becoming very quiet or still. So one reason that we have trouble processing some of this trauma is that we stay stuck trying to process it in a certain way. I would say a serious way. And we're kind of always processing it from that same level. If we get like really fucking loud and active, blah, 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 and we're swearing at it or being loud or being like, why the fuck did this happen? Fuck, banning pillows, jumping up and down, blah, 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 blah. If we're getting loud, all of a sudden we are processing it from a different level. And just processing it from a different level will make us more effectively able to process it and get through it. So don't be afraid to get loud and get active. I've done a ton of stuff on this. I know the person who emailed me knows exactly what I'm talking about when I say that. Do not be afraid to get loud. Likewise, do not be afraid to get really quiet and still with it. Meaning, process it from a vibed out meditative point. Don't intellectualize it, let it be there. This is kind of like letting go, but even more than letting go, this is just like be the stillness and see where the resentment and anger goes when there's that stillness. And then, you can play with being very still about this and then being very active about it and just doing fucking whatever to process the anger and resentment. If you do fucking whatever to process it, you will start to process it. This anger and resentment, ultimately, in my opinion, it's a made up story, which we all have. We have all our whole life is made up. We've got made up intellectual stories. I shouldn't say intellectual, but you know what I mean. It's all in our head processing it. If we get rid of that story, there might be feelings there that still feel very strong, but just really right now we can just drop it. And it might immediately come back, but right now we can just drop it. really, we can just drop everything right now. Where's the story? Where's the anger? Where's the resentment right now? It's nowhere. There's nothing. Where's the anger and resentment right now? Nothing. We're just here. We're just here. We're just here. Where is it right now? We're just here. No anger, no resentment. Oh, there's feelings. Oh, it's a story. Whatever. Where is it? Nowhere. The story starts off, whatever. There's a story, it's just a story. We can consciously become more aware of it and process it and then get through it. It's nothing to allow our lives to get all fucked up over, And we know this. We already know this. I'm just saying it's okay to not let your life get fucked up over some past anger or resentment. Fuck it, whatever, it's done. This is it, So, yeah, that's that. That's what I wanted to say in regards to that. I hope that the person who emailed me understood that. I think that you did because you know my stuff. This obviously is the value of like coaching. Like if you work with me one-on-one, I can deal with issues that specifically deal with this that are more subjectively appropriate to you. But this is a general recommendation type of video. And I think hopefully people watching understand that at least part of what I said, one of these recommendations should work for you. It's about processing, in my opinion. Processing openly and also realizing that what's here right now is fine.